Hello, fifth graders. Welcome to your math lesson for today. We are on to a new unit. We are starting with fractions. So for today, you will definitely need your math resource binder, your 5A workbook, maybe your 5A textbook. So it would be a good idea to grab it, and then paper or pencil. And also, of course, if you're using a whiteboard, that's fine too, but just make sure that you have it here and ready to go. All right, so our warm up, we have two warm up problems. These are kind of coming off of our DVI and some of the stuff that we had a little bit of difficulty with. So go ahead, pause, give these a try. Then when you're done, you can come on back and see how you did. So with our exponents, remember we're trying to find the prime numbers here. So even numbers, we can always start with 2 and then 2 times what? We should have 2 times 36. 2 is prime, so we circle it, okay? This is not going to be great. I don't have a lot of room here, but we're just going to keep trying. 2 again, and then 18. 2 again, and 9, and then 9 goes into 3 and 3. This is horrible form. Don't copy me. But when we write these in exponents, remember we have 2 3s, so we have 3 squared times 1, 2, 3, 3 2s. So we would write it 2 cubed. So this would be your answer for number 1. Number 2, the question is which is not a factor, so we have to figure out which one of these can we not divide. So yes, this ends in a 0, which means we can divide it by 5 and 10. You can always, any number ending in a 5 or 0 is divisible by 5 and 10, okay? So now the question is 15 and 25. Looking at 25, if you look here, 250, 25, that means 25 times 10. So that's a factor. So by process of elimination, we'd have to do 15. But you could also do the division and find out that, yeah, it's not evenly divisible. So 15 is not a factor of 250. Okay, I already mentioned that we're going to be doing fractions today. Specifically, we're going to be working on reviewing fraction terms. So we're going to just be going over some of the terminology that we always use with fractions, okay? And then on top of that, once we get past that, we're going to be working on eventually expressing mixed numbers as improper fractions. We're going to take some steps between A and B to do that. But let's go ahead and get started. So your math resource binder, you should have added some fraction notes that you picked up at materials pickup. If you have not yet put those things into your math resource binder, do it. I don't want the messages that say, I lost it. Find it in your math resource binder. So if you put it right there, then that won't be a problem, okay? So I'm going to flip you around and we're going to get into our work. So fractions. Again, this is just kind of a review about the terms we use with fractions. So a fraction, right, is always a number over another number. This top number we call the numerator. This bottom number we call denominator. So the numerator and denominator. A proper fraction is when the numerator is less than the denominator. For instance, 2/3, right? 2 is less than 3, so we call this proper. An improper fraction is when the numerator is greater than the denominator. So 3/2, that would be an improper fraction, okay? Equivalent fractions, these are fractions that represent the same value, but they look a little different. So 2/3, 4/6, these are equivalent. If you were to draw a picture of 2/3, why don't I just do that? So if we have unit bars that are equal in length, then we have thirds and sixths. If I color in 2/3 and 4/6, you should notice these are the same, right? It's the same. So we call these equivalent fractions because they use different numbers, but they should represent the same amount, the same value, okay? Like fractions are fractions that have the same denominator. So 1/3 and 2/3 are considered like fractions because their denominators are both 3, okay? Mixed numbers, which we're going to work with a little bit today. Mixed numbers are numbers that are made up of a whole number and a fraction. So 1 and 2/3 would be a mixed number. Fractions are in simplest form when the numerator and denominator share no other factors than 1. So we would say that 2/4 is not in simplest form because 2 and 4 share the factor of 2. Okay. However, 1 and 4 is in simplest form because 1 and 2 do not share any factors other than 1. Okay? So this is just kind of a rundown of things that we will talk about. This should be in your math resource binder available for you to reference as we're working. Okay? So that if I say something and you're like, I don't know what that means, you can look here and say, ah, that's right. Equivalent fractions. We're working with that. Okay. Speaking of equivalent fractions, that's our first thing. It should be review. You absolutely should have worked with equivalent fractions in previous years. Okay, but we're going to remind ourselves of this. So, for instance, if we said equivalent fractions, these are our directions today. Find the equivalent, or at least not the whole day, but for this part of the day. Find the equivalent fraction. Okay, so what does that mean? For instance, if you have 1/2 equals something over 8. You want to figure out what it equals, okay? So this is where we want to think about. We have two denominators. So we want to ask ourselves, how do we get from 2 to 8 using multiplication or division? So we get from 2 to 8 by multiplying by 4. So we need to do that to the numerator. That's what makes it equivalent. So 1 times 4, we get 4, 4/8. Fifth graders, I'm going to write these little numbers here so that I'm really demonstrating to you how to do it. However, you don't have to write those numbers. If you're able to look and find that equivalent fraction on your own, you do that, okay? So let's say 1/3 equals how many ninths? So again, we have two denominators, so that's what we have to look at. How do we get from 3 to 9? That's right, we multiply by 3. If we do it to the denominator, we have to do it to the numerator. So 1 times 3 is 3. So our equivalent fraction is 3/9. Let's try another one. 2/5 equals 6 over what? So I switched it up a little bit on you, but we have two numerators. The question is still the same. How do I get from 2 to 6 using multiplication or division? I multiply by 3. If I do that to my numerator, I need to do that to my denominator. So 5 times 3 is 15. So our equivalent fraction is 6/15. We're going to keep on going. Let's say 9/10 equals 27 what? So again, two numerators. How do I get from 9 to 27? That's right, times 3. So I need to do that to the denominator. 10 times 3 is 30. We're going to keep on going. So 12/15 equals how many fifths? So I switched it up a little bit, but we still follow that same process, okay? We have two denominators. The question is, how do I get from 15 to 5 using multiplication or division? In this case, we have to use division. So we go from 15 to 5 by dividing by 3, which we need to do to our numerator then. 12 divided by 3 is 4, so we should get 12/15 equals 4/5. Let's try another. 16/20 equals 8 over what? So again, we have two numerators. How do I get from 16 to 8 using multiplication or division? I have to use division. 16 divided by 2 is 8, which means we have to do the same thing to the denominator. 20 divided by 2 is 10. Okay, we're going to switch it up just a little bit. Same process, but we're going to go the opposite direction, but it shouldn't really change things. We just have to think about going right to left. So what do I mean by that? Let's just say 25/40 equals what over 8? So we still want to look at the same process, but we just have to figure out, how do I go from 40 to 8? So we're going the opposite direction, okay? We still have two denominators, but this is our full fraction, so we have to go the opposite direction to make this work. So how do I go from 40 to 8? We divide by 5. So we have to do the same thing to the numerator, 25 divided by 5 is 5, so we get 5/8. Let's do a couple more. Let's say 1/3 equals, how many 24ths? So again, we're going right to left. So how do we get from 3 to 24? We're going to do that by multiplying by 8. So multiply by 8, 8 24ths. We're going to do a couple more like this. Thanks while I think this through. So 8 26ths equals, well, 4 over what equals 8 26ths, okay? So we want to look at our numerators because that's what we have two of. How do we get from 8 to 4? We divide by 2. So that's what we're going to do with our denominator. 26 divided by 2 is 13. So we get 4/13. Let's try one more of these before we move on to the next part of our lesson. 15/50 equals, I'm actually going to say, well, yeah, we'll go this way. What over 100? So we're still looking at the one we have two of, which is two denominators. So what do I do? Division or multiplication to get from 50 to 100? We're going to say multiplication. So 50 times 2 is 100. So that's what we need to do to our numerator as well. 15 times 2 is 30. So we'd say that 30/100 is the equivalent fraction. So fifth graders, you're going to have to do a little bit of this kind of work today, this equivalent fraction work, okay? But that's not it. You remember the second part of our objective says that we're going to be working on expressing mixed numbers as improper fractions. So you should also, in your math resource binder, find a set of notes walking you through how you express a mixed number as an improper fraction. So you should find those notes in your math resource binder so that you can follow along with me now. So our first step here is to express 3 3/4 as an improper fraction. So step 1 tells you to write the denominator of your mixed number as the denominator of your improper fraction. Okay, so you're going to take that denominator and it's going to go into your improper fraction. So 3 3/4, ultimately our denominator should be fourths. So we're going to write fourths. Step 2 is to multiply the whole number by the denominator. This is our whole number, okay? 4 is our denominator, so we would multiply 3 times 4, which gets us 12, okay? Step 3 is to add the numerator to your product. Add that numerator to your product. So the numerator is 3. Our product was 12, so 12 plus 3 equals 15. Then you write that sum as the numerator of your improper fraction, which is 15/4. Step 5, and really any time we're working with fractions, the final step is always going to be, if possible, simplify. If you can simplify your fractions, you should do so, okay? So this is our final step. That means that following through these steps, 3 3/4 equals 15/4. Okay? So first of all, keep in mind that these notes are going to be handy. You can use these as we're going through and expressing these mixed numbers as improper fractions. Okay? So let's try some mixed numbers into improper fractions together. So let's try 5 1/2. 5 1/2. We're going to express this as an improper fraction. So remember, step 1 tells us that the denominator of our fraction is the denominator in our answer. Okay, so we're going to get 2 as our denominator for our improper fraction. Step 2 says to multiply the whole number by the denominator. So 5 times 2 is 10. Then we add the numerator. 10 plus 1 is 11. That's the numerator of our improper fraction. We check, can we simplify? No, we cannot. So our answer is 11 halves. Let's try another one. 2 and 2 sevenths. So step 1, our denominator should stay the same, at least to start. Step 2, we multiply our whole number by our denominator. 2 times 7 is 14. Then we add the numerator. 14 plus 2 is 16, which is our new numerator. We check, can we simplify? We cannot, so we are done. I'm going to have you try a couple more with me, and then I'll have you try a few on your own as well. So try, we'll say 5, well, let's not do 5, we already did that. Let's try 3 and 4 fifths. So step 1, our denominator, should stay the same. Step 2, we multiply our whole number by our denominator. 3 times 5 is 15. We add 4. 15 plus 4 is 19. 19 fifths. Cannot be simplified. So that is our answer. Let's try 6 and 3/4. So step 1, our denominator is still fourths. Now we multiply. 6 times 4 is 24. 24 plus 3 is 27. Our answer is 27/4. Fifth graders, I'm going to give you 3 that I would like you to work on right now. We'll say 1 and 2/3, 4 and 4/5, 5 and 3/8. So go ahead and turn these 3 into improper fractions. Pause and do so, and then when you come on back, see how you did. So 1 and 2/3. Thirds is still our denominator. 1 times 3 is 3, plus 2 is 5, which cannot be simplified. Next, 5 is our denominator. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 4 is 24, which also cannot be simplified. I promise you that sometimes you do have to simplify. It just is happening that we don't have to today. 8 is still our denominator. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 3 is 43. So hopefully you got these 3 as your improper fractions. Your homework tonight is going to be asking, and your practice work is going to be asking you to do both of these things, finding these equivalent fractions and then turning your mixed numbers into improper fractions. Fifth graders, I would like to do just a couple problems. I know we've been working for a while, but I'd like to do a couple problems out of your textbook just so you are getting the hang of some of this other stuff as well. Let's see. Let me just double check. You know what? I take that back. Thank you for listening to my wanderings and ramblings. We're going to stop there, actually. Okay, so remember those 2 sheets that you guys have in your math resource binder are going to be helpful as we move forward. So we have practice, which is going to be your workbook pages. So your workbook pages are going to be 46, 47. This is your practice work. It is not your homework, okay? Your homework is going to be a worksheet or an attachment that looks a lot like what you did in your workbook, okay? Very similar types of problems, plus a couple of review problems as well, okay? So you're going to complete that attachment. You can do it on any piece of paper that you have around your home, and then take a picture and submit your work of the homework attachment, okay? As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Good luck.